Hello sailors, and welcome back to the channel. In today's edition of As We See It, Let's Talk Cruises. I want to talk about the last 2 years of our cruising adventures. We started 2020 and a good part of January on board Cunard's Queen Victoria. The first trip in that itinerary was a 4-day Hamburg round trip, followed by a transatlantic to Fort Lauderdale with a stop off at Hamilton and Port Canaveral. Life felt good and there didn't seem to be too much to worry about. Little did we know what was on the horizon. After our departure from the Queen Victoria in Fort Lauderdale, the ship continued on her 3-month voyage down to Argentina before she would return to Southampton in March 2020. We had some nice trips booked for the rest of 2020, including some voyages and some new ships. April would see us on board the Celebrity Apex on a 5-day cruise, with a couple of days at home before heading to New York for 4 days and then boarding Anthem of the Seas in a transatlantic journey back to Southampton. We were on the maiden voyage of Anthem back in 2015, so some of you may know that this is our favourite ship, and we couldn't wait to get back on board. I needed me a fix of the bumper cars and ripcord by iFly. So May would have seen us head out to Barcelona on a trip on board MSC Seaside for 4 nights, and then finally in October we'd board P&O Cruises Iona for a 7-night Northern European cruise. This would be our first time on board P&O. We had a couple of cruises booked already for 2021. In January we would be doing the transatlantic leg of Cunard's Queen Victoria to Fort Lauderdale, with a stay in Miami for a few days after the cruise. Oh, and let's not forget that $600 per person on board spend. Oh, what I could have bought with that. It would be back to P&O Cruises for another cruise on Iona, the same 7-day itinerary as October, in the February. As the pandemic ripped worldwide, the booked trips slowly started to get cancelled, with cruise companies halting sailing and anchoring their ships across the world. There was nothing to look forward to. We did do a week's staycation and break in Lincolnshire in September with Ian and Chris, followed by a day at Alton Towers. Our trip in the MSC Seaside was moved to the end of September 2020 and then got cancelled and then moved to 2021. 2020 was over, and the only cruise we had completed this year was the back-to-back cruises on Cunard's Queen Victoria in the January. It was about a week before Christmas 2020 and we were locked down again. We started 2021 in a lockdown, and that wasn't due to be lifted until around April. With no cruises planned except for the MSC Seaside, which we had moved to later in the year in the hope that it might go ahead. Finally, a glimmer of hope came along. As we slowly started to come out of lockdown with various steps every 4 weeks, it looked like after 18 months a cruise ship was finally going to be sailing again with passengers in UK waters. Yes, we would finally be stepping on a gangway and on board a cruise ship. MSC Virtuosa was the first cruise ship to sail with passengers from UK waters. It was also to be her maiden voyage. The ship can normally hold 6,000 passengers. For her first month of voyages, and due to the pandemic and government guidelines, it was to sail with 1,000 passengers maximum. It was a 4-day Seacation cruise, and was to stop at one port only, which was Portland on the Dorset coast. If you wanted to get off in the port, then you were only allowed to get off on a ship-planned excursion to keep everyone within the COVID bubble. At £50 per person for the tour, I'd rather stay on the ship. To sail, you didn't need to be vaccinated, you just had to have a lateral flow test at the port before boarding, and that had to be administered by the cruise company. Chris and Ian had also booked, and it would be exciting to be on board with them. They have not sailed with MSC, but we have previously in the Arabian Gulf, and we were on the maiden voyage of MSC Bellissima, the sister ship of Grandiosa and Virtuosa. So the boys are all vaccinated. I'd had my first dose of the vaccination about 5 weeks prior to boarding. I'd also been testing daily for the last 2 weeks. I was a hockey maker supporting the Great Britain men's and women's hockey teams with their FIH Pro League matches that took place a week before. We all passed our COVID test and we were given permission to board. It was amazing to be back on board. Emotions were also high. To be on this first cruise to leave UK shores for 18 months and with lower numbers was superb. There was lots of press and lots of cruise vloggers on board. The other cruise lines watched on as MSC set sail. and then about a month or so later started to release itineraries of their own, doing UK sailcations with current COVID guidelines in place. Buffets were staff service and masks were to be worn whilst walking around indoors, except when in your stateroom, eating or drinking in a lounge or restaurant. The guidance started to change and double vaccinations were required to board the ship, as well as prior testing, physical distancing and onboard precautions. I was given the option to have my second dose early. I brought it forward, and that could mean that we could look at last minute bookings, as there were some really good deals now that more companies were doing these short vacations. We found a really good deal on P&O Britannia for 3 nights in July with no ports. The ship would just sail up and down the English Channel. We've done this type of cruise before and it's actually quite nice. We'd always wanted to try Britannia, so we booked, we packed and we set sail on our 3-day cruise to nowhere. We booked the retreat for the whole trip and bumped into Janet and John and had a blast with them, especially with Sunbed Gate and the absolute drivel couples we talk about in the hot tub. The weather was marvellous, and if you see some of the pictures, you wouldn't think we were sailing up and down the English Channel. It looked like we were somewhere in the Med or the Caribbean. Back in 2018-2019, we had heard about Virgin launching 3 new cruise ships and they were looking to revolutionise the cruise industry. We were intrigued and paid a refundable deposit to be one of the first to be able to book once the ships were launched. Scarlet Lady was the first of the 3 ships to be launched under the brand of Virgin Voyages. She was to have her mermaiden voyage from Miami in April 2020. We did look at the itineraries that didn't look that appealing, as they were quite short 4 to 5 day trips. We would have to have booked back-to-back cruises to make that trip from London to Miami worthwhile. Scarlet Lady's debut was cancelled. Virgin Voyages announced that they would be bringing the ship over to the UK, and they would do a series of 3-day and 4-day UK summer soiree cruises from Portsmouth. We'd found a nice 4-day trip on board at a reasonable price for the suite, so we decided to book it. After booking, we then saw a great deal on the 3-day trip that was going just before, so we indulged and decided to do a back-to-back. Virgin and Royal Caribbean were the only companies allowing back-to-back trips to be booked due to the pandemic. At the end of August, we headed down to Portsmouth for a 3-day weekender and then a 4-day seacation, where we were lucky enough to board the Scarlet Lady. We'd heard some really good things about the trip she'd already done. We found a great deal for another cruise on board Princess Cruises in September. We'd heard really good things about Princess through friends, so we thought that we'd give them a try. So we booked a 4-day trip for September just after my birthday. Now you may remember earlier I'd mentioned that we had moved our MSC Seaside trip from Barcelona to later in 2021. It was supposed to be at the end of September, but again this was cancelled due to flights and also local lockdowns in Spain, and also MSC changing the ship and itineraries. It would still be on a Seaview Seaside style ship, although the changes were getting messy and the itineraries kept changing. Princess Cruises had 2 ships leaving from Southampton, Regal and Sky Princess, with Sky Princess being the newer ship and on the same hull as Britannia, which we had enjoyed, and knowing that the MSC trip was cancelled, we decided to book on board the Sky Princess. It was 16 days since our last time at sea on board the Scarlet Lady. Here we were arriving at Southampton train station. I had a text from Princess Cruises to say that I'd been booked for my lateral flow test. Then about 15 minutes later, another to say that my test was negative and I was cleared to board. It was a bit of a mix-up that took quite some time to get sorted at the port, so anxiety levels were a little bit high. Once sorted, we stepped on board and we loved the medallion technology. As part of the wider Carnival Corporation, they really should release this technology across all their brands. It was what Virgin had tried to do, but Virgin's technology wasn't stable and didn't always work, but Medallion was exceptional. There was something missing from this trip and I still can't quite put my finger on it. Was it because there was no ports, or had we been spoiled on the Virgin trip? Virgin's food was certainly much better than onboard Princess. We didn't hate the brand at all, we just feel it'll be a while before we step back on board. We did enjoy the enclave at the spa on board, although at times it was busier than you would have expected during a pandemic. Our final cruise of the season, well, maybe final one, who knows, came at the end of October on one of our favourite ships, Anthem of the Seas. Now, Anthem was our 3rd cruise ship and our first maiden voyage way back in April 2015. We sailed in her for 11 days, including trying out a back-to-back cruise and moving to a loft suite for the 2nd trip to try out one of those. It's a 2-storey stateroom, a superb bathroom, lounge and balcony downstairs, and upstairs a large bathroom, a walk-in wardrobe and the bed. Unfortunately, we didn't have a loft on this trip. Our UK staycation at Anthem was for 5 nights, and we would finally have some ports. We'd be stopping off in Liverpool and Belfast, 2 places I haven't been to in a while. We were both looking forward to going and seeing those cities again. That was going to be it for us. We didn't book any other cruises for 2021, although we did have a look at a few short trips, but then we decided against it. Now we do have a few 2022 cruises already booked. I mentioned earlier that we'd moved the MSC Seaside, Seaview, whatever it's called, to September 2022. Our booked cruises for 2022 so far will see us spending 3 nights on board Virgin Voyages Valiant Lady in April, 4 nights in Miami, followed by 13 nights on Celebrity Silhouette as we bring her back to Southampton, also in April. In September, 7 nights on MSC Seashore, Seaview, whatever it was called because it kept changing. And in November, 11 nights on board Virgin Voyages Resilient Lady as we bring her from Lisbon back to San Juan in Puerto Rico. We cancelled the MSC trip as the itinerary and the ship kept changing, and it was going to places that we had previously been to and not the couple of ports that we hadn't. It was also getting a bit annoying and messy, and MSC's customer service, well, it's pretty shocking and non-existent. So we had moved the 3 nights in the Valiant Lady to a couple of weeks earlier in the March. We'd literally been getting off in Portsmouth, heading back to London, unpacking, washing, and then packing our larger suitcases, and heading to London Heathrow the following morning. Now, as fun as that sounds, it would probably be quite stressful. We all know a particular salty sea bear, not me, would probably forget to repack something. We found a great deal on P&O Iona for 7 nights. It's a similar itinerary which we had booked in 2020 and 2021, and then it got cancelled due to COVID. It was such a steal for a balcony cabin that we just couldn't say no. We're so looking forward to just getting away again. So there you have it, shipmates. 2021 was quite emotional. The year had more ups and downs in some of our transatlantic crossings. Having cruises to look forward to has really helped us get through, and it was just so nice to just being back on board. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to our socials so you can be notified when we post next. We hope that you enjoyed our content in 2021. Let's hope we can bring you some awesome content in 2022. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones. To 2022, the year we make ship happen. Until the next episode of As We See It, stay safe, thanks for following and watching, and if I don't see you on board, I'll see you by a hot tub very soon.